Dr. Paul, you talked some about monetary policy tonight and the money-making machine and how it finances the war and etc. I was hoping you could say a quick word about the role of Social Security in the money-making machine and also what you do to get rid of it or change it.
On Social Security?
Social Security, yes.
Well, my plan would be to tide people over, but you don't have any money unless you save it someplace. I would save it from overseas and change the foreign policy, and you could, but the transition has to start very soon. So there has to be a group of people, either those who are willing or the young people can opt out of the system and start saving on their own. But there's not going to be a magic wand. You can't just close that down either. But there's no reason, if we act sensibly, why we can't move in that direction. But there's really, it is one of the reasons why the country's going bankrupt. And the Social Security isn't nearly as bad as the Medicare. And now, we're massively expanding Medicare and child, treatments, medical treatments. So that's going to get a lot worse, and it's going to participate in the bankruptcy, the way we're going.
Okay, I'm going to take over here, and I would ask you to keep, we don't want to set limits or anything, but try to focus your question around foreign policy, since that's the topic at hand, yes?
Congressman Paul, it's great to be here tonight. Thank you so much for taking your time. When you become president, when you become president, have you done your committee or whatever, or the people behind you, and actual dollars of closing down the foreign bases and all of the foreign policy that you have done? To generalize the question, but to get specific with your answer, how much money will that save us, and how quickly can we pay down the $60 trillion actual debt of our nation?
Well, the debt, the future obligation is 60 or 70, but that's due to the entitlements, and that might be the biggest deal. But the only way you can work on that is change the foreign policy. But the budget on maintaining the empire is close to $1 trillion a year, and you could save half of that. Probably not the first year, but just think if you didn't have troops in Korea. There's a lot of money there. How about Europe? What about the Middle East? We have 750 bases. We have 130 countries, and other than some a Marine here and there and an embassy, none of that is necessary. You can save a lot. No, I haven't done a study to say that it'll be $100 billion the first year and $300 billion the next year, but we know that not doing anything, that next year it's going over $1 trillion obligation to maintain the empire.
Sure, I think I just misspoke. I think I said 60 billion, but I meant to say 60 trillion.
60 trillion.
But just to follow through real quickly, so how quickly do you think we could get this debt paid off, when you become president and we actually start implementing these policies? How quickly could that? I know it's not going to happen overnight. We can't turn a ship overnight, but trying to get some kind of idea.
Well, the actual debt is $9 trillion. That is a obvious obligation, and as long as it wasn't growing economically, you wouldn't have to deal with that immediately. But the $60 trillion of entitlement obligations, you have to reverse that trend so that you can cut back on those. But that's hard to say. Depends on the mood of the country, the mood of the Congress, and the willingness to, tighten their belts. If you had the ideal situation to work a transition, it would probably take at least 10 years.
Okay, let's say U.S. win the blue shirt, yes?
You mentioned that there was a difference between defense spending and military spending. What exactly is that difference?
The difference between defense spending and military spending. When we spend money on military to go over and bomb Iraq, our defenses go down. We're worse off. We use up a lot of equipment, and we spend a lot of money, and soldiers get killed, and that's negative. If you spend money to defend this country, it means you're going to have a well-organized army. You might have a few submarines and a few things like this, but you don't have to have all this expenditures. Colombia would be a good example of military spending and hurting our defense as well. Nobody talks about Colombia, but we're spending billions of dollars down there, and we're very much involved in a civil war, supposedly to stop drugs, and this sort of thing. But we're down there to protect oil and sell helicopters, this sort of thing. But that's military spending, and actually hurts our defense and helps bankrupt our country.
Yeah, I'm going to take you right there.
Hi. Yes, so real quick, I'd just like to make one comment. I was a former submarine officer, and my brother right now is flying Black Hawks in Afghanistan. He reports to be wildly popular. And my question is without the counterfeit machine, without the deficit spending, and without the income taxes, what would be the major sources of revenue? I mean, we need some.
In the early years, it was a low tariff. They had tariffs, and tariffs aren't necessarily good, but it's a lot better than the income tax. The different revenues, the excise taxes and all, if you get rid of your income tax right now, I understand we would still have enough revenue that would be equivalent to what we were spending 7 years ago. So there's a lot of other fees and things that they collect. Fees for highways, gasoline taxes, and port taxes. So a lot of money comes in into the Treasury, but the income tax is the most onerous, and it's just not unheard of. People say, "Well, what are you going to replace it with?" Nothing. That's what we're going to replace it.
Okay, you in the back. Yes.
Congressman, what do you say to those people who think it's in the U.S. interest to prevent Iran from getting the bomb?
Well, I think the world would be better off if they didn't have one, but that's not our obligation. I usually talk about, the Soviets had 40,000 of them, and we lived through that, and we didn't have to have a nuclear war. The Pakistanis haven't signed the NPT, and they have nuclear weapons, and that's a very, very shaky country, and India is the same way. And it's just that we promote an incentive to get a bomb. As soon as they get one, we subsidize them. If they're threatening to get one, we want to bomb them. As soon as they get one, we run over and subsidize them. That's what we did with India and Pakistan, and now North Korea. We're sending them money. So if they get one, I don't think we should get hysterical. Even if we weren't over there, even if we weren't going to retaliate, I mean, the Israelis aren't going to put up with them. Actually, I think they might even be more frightened of Israel if we weren't over there. So I think I just think that it's just war propaganda, and they have to always have enemies to keep this agitation going. The perpetual war against terrorism and Islamic fascism, and putting these troops invade another country, not realizing that's our problem of occupying foreign Muslim countries. That's where our problems come from.
Okay, unfortunately, we can only take one more question.
Dr. Paul, when you become president and when you bring the troops back home, what about the crime against the Iraqi people? How do we make it up to the people?
Yeah, we touched on that, and that is not easy because there has been a crime. But, and like I said, I wished I could just tax and confiscate all the wealth from all the neocons and everybody who pushed us into the war and everybody that voted for the war. But, there is a concern about it. But it's sort of like none of you are guilty. If none of you pushed for the war, so you're not guilty. I don't feel like it's morally right for me to just tax you more and more. And the example I use is that we as a people have been taxed to blow up the bridges in Iraq. Now we are being taxed to rebuild the bridges in Iraq. At the same time, our bridges are falling down. So I'm not for it, but I certainly think that if peace came to the country, which I suspect there'd be a much better chance, that our country would be more prosperous, and then we should, the most important thing they could get from us would to learn how a free market works, and they would become prosperous. If not, and we're prosperous, I think we should certainly be generous in helping them out, but I would not tax you to do it. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, Representative Paul won't be able to answer any more questions or remain. But I would like to remind you, we're actually